On my wedding night, I overheard my husband tell his father as they looked at me, "She'll be our entertainment now." For 30 years, I was a prisoner on a ranch where the most respected men in town hid their true nature. Hello, my dear viewers watching from the other side of the screen. What a blessing to talk with you today. My name is Dorothy Florence Williams, and I'm 79 years old with a lifetime of experiences. I was born in a small town in rural Kentucky, but today I live here in Asheville, North Carolina, where I found my peaceful corner after so much suffering. You know what I like to do in the afternoons? Paint pictures. Yes, this old lady discovered she has a knack for painting after turning 70. Who would have thought, right? I started after my granddaughter Lily gave me a set of paints for my birthday, saying I needed a hobby. At first, I thought nothing would come of it. But look at me now. My paintings decorate my children's homes, and we've even sold some at the local farmers market here in town. I'm now in my little back room that I've transformed into a studio. It's small, but full of light, with a window that looks out to the yard where I have my rose bushes. On the wall, I've hung some of my paintings, mostly landscapes of the Blue Ridge Mountains here in Asheville. In the corner is a small table with an old radio that plays country music while I paint. The smell of paint mixes with the coffee I always keep ready in a thermos because painting makes me so thirsty. Before I continue sharing my story, I'd like to ask a favor. If this video touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. This helps this grandma continue sharing her stories and perhaps helping others who are going through what I went through. And you, my dears who are watching me now, tell me in the comments, what town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Was it early with your morning coffee, after lunch, or already at night wrapped in a blanket? I always read all the comments and feel so happy knowing where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Let me know, okay? Let's create a circle of kindness. Today I want to share with you a story that I kept for many years, locked deep in my heart. A story about appearances that deceive and about how the most respected families can hide terrible secrets. But it's also a story of strength, my dears. Of a simple girl who learned that sometimes revenge can be a form of justice when the world turns a blind eye to your suffering. It wasn't easy living through what I did, nor is it easy to tell. But I think the time has come to let this story out, because maybe it can help some woman who's going through something similar. Sometimes we're trapped not just by chains that can be seen, but by invisible ones made of fear, shame, and helplessness. For a long time, I thought my story was mine alone, a cross I would carry by myself to the grave. But with age, we learn that our pain, when shared, can become light on someone else's path. And that's what I hope to do today. So settle in, grab your coffee or tea, and let's go back in time. I'll take you to 1965, when I was just a young woman of 19, full of dreams and with a head filled with romantic ideas about marriage and life together. I was born in Pikeville, a tiny town on the Kentucky-West Virginia border, in 1946. A place of simple folk where everyone knew each other and doors were left unlocked. My father, Jeremiah Williams, was a carpenter, a man with calloused hands and a soft heart. My mother, Teresa, was a seamstress, a good one too, who sewed for all the important families in the area. She was a strong woman, the kind who wakes with the first rooster crow and only rests when the moon is high in the sky. We were 6 siblings. I was in the middle, with 2 older sisters, Claire and Josephine, and 3 younger siblings, Benjamin, Jack, and Alma, the baby. Our house was simple, with a dirt floor and clay roof. It had 3 rooms: the living room that doubled as a kitchen, with a wood stove that stayed lit all day, a large bedroom where my parents slept with Alma, who was still a baby, and another room where the 5 of us slept, girls on one mat, boys on another. The backyard was the richest part of our home. My father had planted a bit of everything: mango trees, apple trees, peach trees, orange trees. We also had a garden that my mother tended with great care. That's where almost everything we ate came from. I learned early on to work the soil, to know when a plant needs more water or when it's asking for sun. Our life was simple but full of small joys. In the morning, we woke to the smell of coffee that Mother had already put on the fire. We'd have coffee with cornbread, sometimes with a bit of cheese when times were better. After that, everyone went about their duties. The older ones went to the small-town school, a 40-minute walk away. My younger siblings and I stayed to help at home. My favorite chore was taking care of the chickens. We had a small hen house, always full. I would give them corn, carefully collect the eggs. I liked talking to the chickens, telling them my secrets. My mother found it funny. This girl, instead of making friends, chats with the chickens. But I was too shy, found it difficult to talk to other children. In the afternoon, when the sun wasn't so strong, we could play a little. We played Ring Around the Rosie, hide and seek, made rag dolls. My sister Claire, the oldest and smartest, invented the best games. There was a creek near our house, and sometimes we'd go there to catch minnows with cane baskets. Those were simple days of bare feet and laughter carried on the wind. On Sundays, we'd all dress up for the little Baptist church. Dad and my brothers in pants and starched shirts. Me, my sisters, and my mother in dresses she'd sewn herself. After service, there was always a special lunch: fried chicken with biscuits, grits, collard greens cooked in bacon fat. It was the day we ate best all week. Back then, in Pikeville, we had the Thompson family, who owned nearly everything in the region. They had cattle ranches, tobacco plantations, the only general store, and even the only gas station in town. Old Man Thompson, Mr. Abraham, was like a king in our little town. When he rode his horse down Main Street, everyone stopped to greet him. My father always said, "Take off your hat for Mr. Abraham's son. He's the one in charge here." The main Thompson Ranch was about 3 miles from town. It was a huge white house with a porch that wrapped all the way around. They said it had more than 20 rooms. I had never been inside, of course. People like us only went as far as the gate to deliver orders or look for work. But I saw the big house from afar when I went with my father to deliver some furniture he had made, and I thought it looked like a fairy tale palace. It was on that ranch that I first saw Mr. Abraham's son, August Thompson. I must have been about 12, had gone with my father, who was delivering a new table for the dining room. While we waited on the back porch, I saw a young man riding out on a black horse, so shiny it looked like it was made of satin. The young man was handsome too, looked like a prince from the stories. "Who's that?" I asked my father. "That's August, Mr. Abraham's son. He's studying in the capital to become a doctor," my father replied. And he added, with a strange tone in his voice that I only understood much later, "That one's just like his father. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree." It was just a moment, but that image stayed in my head. The handsome young man on the black horse, as if he had stepped out of a dream. At that age, I still believed in fairy tales, in princes on white horses. I didn't know that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they hide behind charming smiles and sweet words. Life continued its peaceful course in Pikeville, but as I grew up, things began to get harder. My father started falling ill when I was 14. Rheumatism, they said. His hands, once so skillful, began to twist, to hurt so much he could barely hold his tools. The work began to dwindle, and so did the money. My mother started sewing from dawn till night to compensate. My older sisters, Claire and Josephine, found work in town, one as a clerk at the pharmacy, the other helping in the kitchen of the only hotel in town. I began taking care of the house and younger siblings more, so my mother could sew more. It was a difficult time. Food was sometimes scarce. We had to sell almost all our chickens. I remember nights when we went to bed early because there was no dinner. My mother would say, "Sleep, child, sleep feeds you." Despite the difficulties, I kept studying. I went to school in the morning, came back at noon to prepare lunch for the younger siblings, and in the afternoon helped my mother with the sewing. I learned to hem, sew on buttons, do overcast stitches. My hands were small, good for more delicate work. That's how, when I turned 17, Mrs. Thompson, Abraham's wife, Eliza, sent for my mother. "Does your daughter have a knack for sewing?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. She learned from me since she was little," my mother replied. "Then send her to work here at the ranch. We need a girl to help with the mending of clothes and with the bed linens." It was an opportunity we couldn't refuse. The salary offered was good, more than I could earn anywhere else in Pikeville. Plus, I would live at the ranch, which meant one less mouth to feed at home. My father didn't like the idea much. "Child, I don't know. That ranch," he started, but my mother interrupted him. "Jeremiah, we don't have a choice." And so, with a heavy heart, I packed my few clothes in a bundle and went to the Thompson Ranch. I didn't know I was walking into the spider's web, like an innocent fly that doesn't see the danger until it's too late. The Thompson Ranch on the inside was even more impressive than I had imagined. The hallways were wide, with wooden floors that shone like mirrors. The walls had paintings of important people, ancestors of the family, all with severe looks that seemed to follow me. The furniture was made of noble woods, oak and cherry, some imported from abroad, as Mrs. Thompson made a point of telling each visitor. My little room was in the back of the house, near the kitchen. It was simple, but still better than any place I had ever slept. It had a bed just for me, a small wardrobe, and even a little table with a mirror. In the first few days, I felt like I was playing at being rich. My work began early. Before the sun was up, I was already helping prepare breakfast for the bosses. Then I went to the sewing room, where I spent most of the day mending clothes, ironing, folding. Sometimes Mrs. Thompson would call me to help her choose fabrics or to fit new dresses that the town's seamstresses were making for her. Old Abraham Thompson hardly ever stayed at home. He lived between the ranches, taking care of business. When he was present, the whole house was on alert. He was demanding, liked everything impeccable. He had a way of looking at people as if always assessing how much they were worth. When he looked at me, I felt a chill running down my spine. In the first few months, I hardly saw their son, August. I knew he was finishing his studies in Nashville, only came to the ranch during vacations or special holidays. The older employees spoke of him in whispers. "He's the spitting image of his father," some said. "Got his temper, too," others would add, always looking around, afraid of being heard. It was during Easter, in 1964, that August returned to spend a few days at the ranch. I was in the back garden, hanging sheets on the line, when he appeared. He wasn't riding the black horse this time, but he was still as handsome as I remembered, maybe even more so. At 26, August Thompson had become an elegant man, with a smile that seemed to light up everything around him. "Your mother's new helper?" he asked, stopping a few steps from me. I was so nervous I almost dropped the laundry basket. "Yes, sir." "My name is Dorothy," I replied, eyes lowered, as I had learned I should speak to the bosses. "Don't call me sir, please. I'm August," he said, with a light laugh that sounded like music to my ears. From that day on, August began to appear by chance in the places where I was working. In the sewing room, in the garden, even in the kitchen, where normally the men of the family didn't enter. He always brought some excuse, but his eyes didn't hide his interest. At first, I tried to avoid him. I knew that a girl like me shouldn't even dream about the boss's son. "That only brings trouble," said Miss Rita, the older cook, who had seen similar stories end badly. But August was persistent and charming. My God, how charming he was. He knew how to say the right words, make compliments that left me blushing. He brought small gifts, a hair ribbon, a book of poetry, a flower picked from the garden. "A beauty like yours shouldn't be hidden on this ranch," he would say. And I, innocent, believed every word. Over time, the quick conversations in the corners of the house evolved into secret meetings in the garden after everyone had gone to sleep. We'd sit on the stone bench, under the stars, and August would talk about the places he had seen, his plans for the future, how he wanted to modernize the family business. He also talked about us, about how he had been enchanted by me from the first time he saw me. "You're different from the others, Dorothy. You have your own light," he would say, holding my hands in his. It was on one of those nights, with the scent of honeysuckle intoxicating the air, that he kissed me for the first time. My first kiss. I felt as if the whole world had stopped spinning for a moment. "I love you," he whispered in my ear. And I, already completely in love, believed it. The following months were like a dream. August decided to stay longer at the ranch, telling his father he wanted to learn more about managing the business. In reality, he stayed to be near me. Our meetings remained secret, although I suspected some employees knew. Miss Rita looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern. Once she even said, "Girl, be careful with what you're doing. Rich men don't marry poor girls." But I was blind with love, deaf to any advice. In September 1964, something happened that changed everything. I went to town to visit my family, as I did once a month. My father was worse, could hardly get out of bed anymore. My mother seemed to have aged 10 years in those months. Even with the money I sent, the situation at home was difficult. That's when I decided to tell them about August. "Mom, there's a young man interested in me," I began, while helping wash the dishes after lunch. My mother looked at me with those tired eyes. "What young man, child?" When I said it was August Thompson, she dropped the plate she was drying. "Holy Mother of God, Dorothy, this can't be good. A boss's son doesn't court a maid to marry her." But I insisted it was different, that August truly loved me. I told them about the meetings, the gifts, the promises. My father, hearing from his bed, asked me to come closer. "Daughter," he said, with a weak voice, "a man who hides the courtship doesn't have good intentions." I was upset. I had hoped my parents would be happy for me, that they would see the chance for a better life that was opening up. When I returned to the ranch, determined to prove everyone wrong, I told August about the conversation with my parents. To my surprise, he wasn't angry. On the contrary, he smiled in that way that made my heart race. "They're right to be concerned," he said. "It's time to do things the right way." And then, kneeling in front of me, he took my hands. "Dorothy Williams, will you marry me?" I don't think I had ever been so happy in my life as in that moment. Tears were running down my face as I said yes several times. August hugged me, spun me in the air, promised we would have a wonderful life together. "I'll talk to my father tomorrow," he guaranteed. "He'll understand. We're a traditional family. We respect marriage." The next day, I didn't see August in the morning. I learned from other employees that he was meeting with his father in the office since early. The hours dragged as I tried to concentrate on work, my heart beating fast with anxiety. It was only late afternoon when August appeared in the sewing room where I was alone finishing a mend. "It's done," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. There was something different about him, a strange gleam in his gaze that I couldn't identify at the time. My father gave his blessing. "We'll get married in December, before Christmas." I was so excited that I didn't notice the signs, the way his gaze shifted from mine when he talked about the wedding plans, the way his father, Mr. Thompson, began to look at me when we met around the house, no longer with contempt, but with an interest that made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't explain why. The following weeks were filled with preparations. Mrs. Thompson, surprisingly, took the news well. "August has always been determined," she said, with a resignation that I confused with approval. She herself took charge of providing my wedding dress, calling the most famous seamstress in the region. "You're going to enter the Thompson family? You need to look like one of us," she explained. I was relieved of some tasks so I could focus on the preparations. I learned etiquette with a special teacher, contracted from Nashville. I learned to use the right cutlery, to converse about appropriate subjects, to behave like a society lady. It was as if they were molding me, transforming the simple girl from Pikeville into something I wasn't. August became more distant during this period. "Always busy with business," he said. Our meetings in the garden became rare. When we did manage to be alone, he seemed anxious, hurried, different from the caring man who had won me over. I attributed it all to the stress of the preparations, the pressures of the family. In October, I got time off to visit my parents and tell them the news. My mother listened to everything in silence, a silence that said more than 1,000 words. In the end, she only asked, "Are you sure, daughter?" And I, foolish as I was, answered with all conviction, "I am, Mom. He loves me." It was the last time I saw my father alive. He passed away 2 weeks later, unable to walk me down the aisle as he had always dreamed. His last advice to me was, "Trust your instincts, daughter. If something seems wrong, it probably is." The wedding was set for December 18th, 1965. St. Mark's Church, the largest in the region, was all decorated with white flowers specially brought from Nashville. It seemed like a dream. All the important ranchers and merchants were invited. The bride, daughter of a simple carpenter, entering the church looking more beautiful than an angel, on the arm of the groom's older brother, since my father was no longer among us. If I could go back in time, I would have noticed the looks between August and his father during the ceremony. I would have noticed how the two whispered and smiled in a strange way. I would have paid attention to Mr. Thompson's words during the toast at the wedding lunch. "Welcome to the family, Dorothy. I'm sure you'll adapt very well to our customs." But I was blinded by the shine of the wedding veil, deafened by the compliments I received from all sides. I thought I had achieved every poor girl's dream, marrying the son of the richest man in the region, entering a respected family, having a life of comfort and prestige. I didn't know I was walking straight into a trap. That August smile hid something dark. That night, the night that should have been the happiest of my life, would be the beginning of my nightmare. After the party, late at night, we went to the nuptial suite that had been specially prepared for us at the ranch. It was the most beautiful room I had ever seen. A huge 4-poster bed, silk curtains, hand-carved furniture. On the dresser, a vase with white roses perfumed the room. It seemed the perfect setting for the beginning of our life together. August asked me to wait a little, that he would soon return. "I'm going to get a surprise for us," he said, with that smile I loved so much. I stayed there, sitting on the edge of the bed, still in my wedding dress, my heart racing with the mixture of emotion and the natural nervousness of a bride on her first night. I looked at myself in the large mirror in a corner of the room. I hardly recognized the girl who looked back at me. The French lace dress, the elegant hairdo, the jewelry borrowed from Mrs. Thompson. Where was the simple girl from Pikeville? In her place, I saw a Mrs. Thompson. At least, that's what I thought I had become. August took longer than expected. I started to get restless. I took off the veil, the shoes that pinched my feet. I walked around the room, admiring the details, trying to calm my anxiety. That's when I heard steps in the hallway. I adjusted my dress, ran my hands through my hair, wanted to look pretty for my husband. The door opened, but it wasn't just August who entered. With him came his father, Mr. Thompson. I felt a knot in my stomach. Why would my father-in-law be there in such an intimate moment? "What's wrong?" I asked, confused. "Did something happen?" August closed the door behind them. His smile was different now. There was something cold in his eyes that I had never noticed before. "Everything's fine, Dorothy," he said in a calm tone that didn't match the strange situation. "My father just came to give the official welcome to the family." Mr. Thompson approached. He had a glass in his hand, offered it to me. "A toast to our new acquisition." The word bothered me, but I accepted the drink out of politeness. The liquid went down hot in my throat, leaving a trail of fire. I had never drunk anything so strong. "You know, Dorothy," began Mr. Thompson, walking around the room as if he owned it, and in fact, he did. "In the Thompson family, we have some traditions." He stopped behind me, so close I could feel his breath on my neck. "Traditions that maintain our family spirit." I looked at August. expecting him to explain what was happening, to ask his father to leave us alone. But he just watched, with a half-smile on his lips, as if waiting for something. That's when I realized the drink was starting to affect me. A slight dizziness, heavy limbs. "What was in that drink?" I managed to ask. "Just something to help you relax," replied August, also approaching, "for your first experience in the family." The way he said experience caused a chill in me. It was at that moment that I understood. I had fallen into a trap. The marriage, the promises of love, everything was part of a plan. What happened that night is engraved in my soul like a scar that never completely disappeared. The hands of my father-in-law in places where only my husband should touch. August's voice encouraging, with words I never imagined hearing from him, and the phrase that destroyed any illusion of love I might still have had. "Enjoy it more, Dad. She'll be our entertainment now." When they finally left me alone hours later, I was broken. Not just my body, but mainly my soul. Wrapped in the stained sheets, I cried until I had no more tears. How could I have been so blind? How did I not see the signs? My father's words echoed in my mind. "Trust your instincts, daughter. If something seems wrong, it probably is." I thought about running away that same night. But where would I go? My father had passed away, my family barely had enough to sustain themselves, and I was now, in the eyes of society, Mrs. Thompson, wife of the heir to the most powerful family in the region. Who would believe my words against theirs? The next morning, August acted as if nothing abnormal had happened. He brought me coffee in bed, asked if I had slept well, talked about plans for the day. His eyes, however, had that cold gleam that I now recognized. It wasn't love that I saw there. It was power. The sick pleasure of having complete control over someone. The following weeks were like living in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. During the day, before the employees and visitors, we were the perfect couple. August, the attentive husband. Me, the young wife, happy to have made a good marriage. But when the doors closed, the mask fell. I discovered that the initiation ritual hadn't been an isolated event. It was just the beginning of a pattern that would repeat itself many times. Father and son shared not only the business, but also a sick pleasure in humiliating and subjugating. And I was now the preferred victim of this perverse game. I tried to resist at first. I screamed, I begged, I fought. This only encouraged them more. "I like it when they have a bit of spirit," Mr. Thompson would say. "Makes everything more interesting." With time, I learned that open resistance only made things worse. I started to disconnect, to leave my own body during those moments. It was the only way to survive. I had no one to turn to. Mrs. Thompson spent most of her time in her wing of the house, medicated with tranquilizers that kept her in a constant fog. Now I understood why. She knew. Maybe she had gone through the same. Maybe she still did. The employees kept their distance from me, some out of fear, others out of misplaced respect for the Thompson family. Once, about 3 months after the wedding, I managed to escape to town. I went to the sheriff's office, tried to talk to the sheriff. "It's about the Thompson family," I began. He interrupted me before I could say more. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband called to warn that you've been a bit nervous, said I can call the doctor if you're causing problems." I realized then that there was no way out. They controlled everything in the region, the politics, the police, the business, the people. I returned to the ranch knowing that my prison had no visible bars, but was as real as any cell. August was waiting for me on the porch, smiling like someone who already knew the result of my attempt. "You still don't understand, dear?" he said, holding my arm with enough force to leave marks. "You're Thompson property now, forever." The isolation grew increasingly greater. I could no longer visit my family without August's company or some trusted employee. My letters were read before being sent. The telephone could only be used under supervision. My entire life came to be controlled, every minute, every movement. When I discovered I was pregnant, 6 months after the wedding, I had conflicting feelings. On one hand, there was the horror of carrying the child of a man I now despised. On the other, a small hope that a baby would change things, that it would bring some humanity back to that house. How foolish. The news of the pregnancy only increased the control over me. "Now you carry the future of the Thompsons," said Mr. Thompson, placing his hand on my still flat belly in a gesture that caused me repulsion. "We need to make sure everything goes well." A doctor was hired to stay at the ranch, monitoring every aspect of the pregnancy. I could no longer go out, not even to walk in the garden without company. The worst of all was the loneliness, not just the physical, but the emotional. I had no one to share my despair with, no one who knew the truth about what happened behind the thick walls of that ranch. At night, lying in bed next to the man I had thought I loved, I prayed in silence, sometimes asking for liberation, other times for death, which seemed to be the only possible way out. It was during the pregnancy that I began to notice things about the family business. The room where I spent most of my time was near the office where August and his father met with their associates. The walls were thick, but if I placed a glass against the wall and put my ear on the other side, I could hear part of the conversations. I didn't understand everything at first. They spoke in code, used terms I didn't know. But with time, I began to piece things together. The Thompsons weren't just ranchers and merchants. There was something much bigger behind the facade of a traditional family. Smuggling, fake documents, deals with corrupt politicians, money laundering. Their empire was built on crimes that, if discovered, would destroy all the reputation and power they flaunted. That knowledge served me no purpose at that moment. I was too weak, too watched to do anything with the information. But I kept everything in memory, each name mentioned, each suspicious deal. If one day I had a chance, it would be my only weapon against them. My son was born in January 1967, after a difficult delivery. A healthy boy, with his father's eyes, but whom I loved immediately, despite everything. I called him Gabriel, an angel's name, hoping he would be different, that he wouldn't carry the Thompson evil in his blood. For a brief moment, with Gabriel in my arms, I felt a new purpose. I couldn't give up now. I had someone who depended on me, someone I needed to protect. But soon, I realized that not even my son would really be mine in that house. Mr. Thompson made a point of making that clear the first time he saw his grandson. "He will be raised as a true Thompson," he declared, looking at the baby with a possessive pride that gave me chills. "We will take care of his education. He needs to understand from an early age the legacy he carries." I understood then that unless I found a way out, my son would repeat the cycle. He would be molded in the image of his father and grandfather, taught to see people, especially women, as objects, properties to be used and discarded. I couldn't allow that. Somehow, I needed to break that cycle of horror. But how? The answer began to form slowly in the long nights when I stayed awake, listening to my baby's breathing in the crib next to the bed. I needed to be patient. I needed to observe, learn, gather information. And, above all, I needed to make them lower their guard, to stop seeing me as a threat. And so I began my long performance. I became the perfect wife, submissive, resigned to her fate. I never tried to resist again, never cried where they could see. I smiled when they expected me to smile, thanked them for the attentions they gave me, pretended acceptance. On the outside, I was Mrs. Thompson, proud of her status. On the inside, I calculated every step of my revenge. The following years were a daily exercise in patience and dissimulation. Each fake smile, each sweet word said to those I despised, was like swallowing poison. But I swallowed it, because I knew my survival, and more importantly, Gabriel's, depended on it. My son was growing too fast. At 3 in 1970, he already showed the lively intelligence that, despite everything, he had inherited from his father. His curious eyes observed everything. His questions often left me without an answer. "Why does Grandpa yell at you, Mommy?" he asked once, after witnessing one of the humiliations I was subjected to daily. I swallowed the knot in my throat and replied, "Sometimes adults speak loudly when they're worried, my love." How to explain the inexplicable to a child? As I pretended acceptance, I noticed that the vigilance over me gradually decreased. August and Mr. Thompson began to see me less as a threat and more as a permanent object, something that would always be there, available for their perverse entertainment. This false sense of security of theirs was my first small victory. I began to pay more attention to the conversations in the office. Now that they judged me tamed, they sometimes talked business in my presence, as if I were invisible or incapable of understanding. I mentally noted each name, each value, each suspicious transaction. The puzzle of the Thompsons' shady business was forming in my mind. In 1973, when Gabriel was 6, something happened that changed everything. Mr. Thompson brought home a young accountant, Ernest Veers, recently graduated from Nashville. He was a thin, bespectacled, apparently shy young man who had been hired to organize the family's accounts. In reality, his job was to create parallel accounting, to hide the illegal earnings. Ernest was different from the other men who frequented the ranch. He didn't have that arrogant air, that silent complicity with the Thompsons' secrets. When he looked at me, there was something in his eyes, respect, perhaps even compassion. I realized he noticed the marks that I sometimes couldn't completely hide, the bruises disguised with face powder and long sleeves even in the heat. One afternoon, while I was serving coffee in the office during a meeting, our hands touched briefly when he took the cup. He dropped a small paper on the tray. "Contact me when you can," the note said, with a phone number. I quickly hid the paper, my heart beating fast. It was too risky, for me and for him. But it was also the first real offer of help in almost 8 years of imprisonment. It took me weeks to gather courage and an opportunity. Finally, one afternoon when August and his father had traveled to Nashville and Gabriel was at school, I used the kitchen phone to call the number. Ernest answered on the first ring, as if he had been waiting. "I can't talk much," I whispered, constantly looking at the door. "But I need to know. Why do you want to help me?" "Because what happens on that ranch is wrong," he replied, his voice low but firm. "I'm not blind, Mrs. Dorothy. I see how they treat you. I've heard things. And there's more. These men aren't just cruel. They're criminals." "I know," I replied. "I've been hearing for years." "I have proof," he said then. "Documents, records of illegal transactions." I just needed someone from inside to confirm what I already suspected. That moment was like a light at the end of the dark tunnel where I had been living for so long. There was a way out. It wouldn't be easy, it would be extremely dangerous, but it existed. In the following weeks, we created a communication system. Small notes exchanged during his visits to the ranch. Information passed in coded phrases when we met in the presence of others. Little by little, we built the case against the Thompsons, he with the financial documents, me with the details of the meetings, names of politicians and authorities involved, dates of suspicious deliveries. Our plan was advancing, slow but sure, when the incident that became my last straw occurred. It was a hot night in March 1974. Gabriel, then 7, had a nightmare and came to my room. August and I had been sleeping separately for years, a concession he had made after Gabriel was born. I calmed my son, told him a story, stayed by his side until he fell asleep again. I was taking him back to his room when we met Thompson in the hallway. He had been drinking, as was common on Thursday nights, when his friends came to play cards. "Ah, the young heir is awake," he asked, with that smile I knew so well and that always caused me chills. "It's time to start learning some things about being a man." He extended his hand to touch Gabriel's face. Something inside me exploded at that moment. All the fear, all the anger contained for years came to the surface like a tsunami. "Don't touch my son," I said, with a voice that didn't seem like mine, moving Gabriel behind me. Thompson's smile disappeared. "Looks like someone forgot her place," he growled. He advanced toward me, but I didn't back down. For the first time in almost a decade, I didn't shrink before him. "Go to your room, Gabriel," I ordered, without taking my eyes off Thompson. "Now!" My son, frightened, ran down the hall. As soon as he disappeared, Thompson grabbed me by the arm, twisting it forcefully. "You will never speak to me like that again," he hissed. "You will never prevent me from doing what I want in this house, including with that boy." What happened next is a blur in my memory. I remember screaming, fighting with a strength I didn't know I had. I remember the sound of glass breaking, a vase we knocked over during the struggle. I remember August appearing, the shock on his face at seeing the scene, his submissive wife confronting the patriarch of the family. The punishment was immediate and brutal. I was locked in the basement of the house, a damp and dark place where they normally kept tools and farm products. No food, no water, just the rats and cockroaches as company. "Maybe a few days here will teach you to be grateful for the roof we gave you," said August, closing the heavy wooden door. I don't know how many days I spent in that basement. I lost track of time in the almost complete darkness. My body ached from the aggressions. My mouth was dry with thirst. But worse than everything was the worry about Gabriel. What were they telling him? That I had run away? That I was sick? Or the terrible truth, that his mother was being punished for defying the authority of the house? At some point, I heard the door open. It was night. I could tell by the darkness outside. A figure entered stealthily, not August or Thompson, but Ernest. He brought a bottle of water, a bread, and more importantly, news. "Your son is fine," he whispered, while I drank the water eagerly. "They told him you're sick in quarantine, but we can't wait anymore. We have to act now." With difficulty, I explained to him my biggest fear. If I run away, I'll never see Gabriel again. They will never allow me to take him, and never let me see him again. Ernest held my trembling hands. "It's not an escape I'm proposing, Mrs. Dorothy. It's justice. I have all the proof now. Documents, recordings, everything the federal police needs to bring down their empire. But we need to act quickly, before they discover what we're doing." It was there, in that dark basement, dirty and hurt, that I made the final decision. I wouldn't run away. I wouldn't abandon my son. I would destroy the Thompsons with their own weapons, the money and power they prized so much. "What do we need to do?" I asked, feeling a cold determination replace the fear. The plan was bold. Ernest had a journalist friend in Louisville who worked for a major newspaper, and contacts in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which had been investigating financial crimes in the state for months. If we could deliver the evidence to them simultaneously, we would create a scandal too big to be hushed up, even with all the Thompsons' influence in the region. "But how will I get out of here?" I asked. "And how can we ensure Gabriel will be safe?" "I'll get you out tonight," he said. "We'll say we're going to get medicine in town. As for your son, we can't take him now. It would be too risky. But as soon as the arrests happen, you can legally get him. It will be the first thing we do." That night, with a broken heart for leaving Gabriel behind, even if temporarily, I left the Thompson ranch for the first time in years. Ernest had convinced August that I needed specific antibiotics which could only be found at the town pharmacy. As I was too weak to go alone, he offered to take me. "If you don't return in 2 hours, I'll know you tried something," August threatened. "And you know what will happen to the boy." We left in Ernest's car, pretending to go to town. But as soon as we were far enough from the ranch, we took the road to Nashville. It was the first phase of our plan. From there, we would take a plane to Louisville, where the journalist and federal agents awaited us. Looking through the car window at the dark night, with the stars shining in the Kentucky sky, I made a silent promise to Gabriel. Mommy will come back, my love. And when I come back, we'll be free. Forever. The journey to Louisville was the longest of my life. Every mile that took us away from Pikeville was a mile further from Gabriel. Even knowing it was the only possible path, my mother's heart bled with worry. Ernest perceived my distress and tried to comfort me. It's a matter of days, Mrs. Dorothy. Soon we'll have your son back. We arrived in Louisville on a gray April morning. The big city, with its tall buildings and busy streets, frightened me. I, who had spent the last 8 years confined to a ranch, barely remembered what the outside world was like. Ernest took me directly to the apartment of his journalist friend, Charles Ferreira, who worked at the Louisville Courier, one of the most influential newspapers in the South. Charles was a middle-aged man, with sharp eyes that seemed to see through people. When he saw me, thin, hurt, and frightened, his expression hardened. "What did they do to you?" he asked, his voice loaded with indignation. It was the first time that someone, besides Ernest, showed true concern for what I had gone through. Seated in the small living room of the apartment, I told my story. I omitted nothing: the abuse, the humiliation, the absolute control the Thompsons exercised over my life. I spoke of my son, of the veiled threats they made about what could happen to him. And finally, detail by detail, I exposed the family's illegal business, the ranches used for money laundering, the bought politicians, the forged documents, the smuggling that crossed the border with West Virginia. Charles recorded everything, occasionally asking questions to clarify a point. When I finished, it was already night. He turned off the recorder and said firmly, "This isn't just a news story. It's a case for the FBI." The next day, Ernest arrived with 2 serious men dressed in discreet suits. They introduced themselves as FBI agents from the Financial Crimes Division. I had to retell the whole story, now with more details about dates, values, names. Ernest complimented with the documents he had secretly copied over the months: false balance sheets, doctored receipts, shell contracts. "What happens now?" I asked after hours of answering questions. "We need to act quickly and with precision," replied the older agent, whose name was Theodore. "The Thompsons are powerful. They have connections. If they suspect we're coming, they might destroy evidence, transfer money to foreign accounts, even flee the country." The plan we developed was bold. While the FBI prepared the operation, gathering more evidence and organizing the teams that would make the arrests, Charles would write a series of explosive reports ready to be published on the day the operation was launched. The simultaneous impact of the police action and the media exposure would make any attempt to hush up the case impossible. But I had an even more urgent concern: Gabriel. "How long until you can get my son?" I asked anxiously. The answer wasn't what I expected. "Mrs. Dorothy, we understand your concern," said Theodore, "but we can't just enter the ranch and take the boy out of there. It would be kidnapping in the eyes of the law. Legally, he is under his father's custody." "But you don't understand. My son is in danger," I exclaimed, desperate. "That's why we're going to accelerate everything," guaranteed the agent. "As soon as we have the arrest warrants, a special team will ensure your son's safety. But we need a few more days." Those were the longest days of my life. Staying at a small hotel in downtown Louisville under the discreet protection of federal agents, I could barely sleep, imagining what they might be telling Gabriel about my disappearance. I prayed that August would be too worried about hiding the traces of his crimes to have time to take out his anger on our son. Charles came to visit me daily with new questions for his reports. One day, he brought a different proposal. "I want to include your complete testimony, Dorothy, with your name, your photo. Your face will humanize this story, show that we're not just talking about financial crimes, but destroyed lives." I hesitated. Exposing my story publicly meant also exposing my shame, my most intimate suffering. But then I thought about how many other women might be living in similar situations, trapped in marriages that were prisons, silenced by fear and shame. "I'll do it," I decided, "but with one condition, that you don't publish anything that might hurt my son, now or in the future." Charles agreed, and the next morning he came with a photographer. I made a point of being photographed facing front, looking directly at the camera without hiding the marks I still had on my face. "I want them to see what they did," I explained. "I want them to know I survived." Finally, after 10 days of intense preparation, Theodore arrived at the hotel with the news I had been waiting for so anxiously. "It's tomorrow. The warrants have been issued. Teams are positioning themselves in Pikeville and in Nashville, where Abraham Thompson is at this moment." I spent the night awake, praying. At 6 in the morning, Theodore called. The operation had begun. At 7, the first extra edition of the Louisville Courier was on the streets, with a headline that would forever change the history of Pikeville: "Empire of Crime, the True Face of the Thompsons." What happened in the following hours seemed like a movie. The news arrived in sequence. Abraham Thompson arrested in his hotel room in Nashville. August trying to resist arrest at the ranch, being restrained by the agents. Politicians and public officials linked to the scheme being detained in their homes and offices. Documents, cash, and even illegal weapons seized in various properties of the family. And finally, the news I had been waiting for the most. Gabriel was safe. A social worker was accompanying him, and they were on their way to Nashville, where I should meet them. The reunion with my son, in the FBI office in Nashville, was the most emotional moment of my life. Gabriel ran to my arms as soon as he saw me, crying and asking where I had been. "Mommy had to solve some important things, my love," I explained, holding his little face between my hands. "But now I'm here, and I'll never leave you again." In the days that followed, the Thompson scandal dominated the news across the country. Charles's reports, published in series, revealed every sordid detail of the criminal empire. My testimony, with photo and all, appeared in the third report of the series, under the title, "The Prisoner of the Ranch, the Human Side of the Thompson Empire." The public reaction was overwhelming. I received hundreds of letters of support, mainly from women who identified with parts of my story. Some reported similar abuse. Others thanked me for giving them courage to seek help. I realized that my pain, shared, was transforming into something bigger than myself. The trial of the Thompsons was one of the longest and most complex in the judicial history of the region. Abraham was sentenced to 28 years in prison for crimes ranging from tax evasion to racketeering. August received 22 years, with aggravating factors for witness coercion. He had tried to bribe ranch employees to deny my testimony. As for Gabriel and me, we began a new life. With the help of Charles and an organization supporting women victims of violence, I got a small apartment in Nashville and a job as an assistant in a clothing store. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and above all, we were free. They were difficult years of reconstruction. Gabriel had frequent nightmares, and so did I. We both needed psychological counseling to process the trauma. But we were together, and each day we learned a little more about how to live without fear. The Thompson case continued to reverberate for years. It inspired changes in domestic violence laws. The book Charles wrote about the case became a bestseller, and part of the profits were donated to institutions that helped women in situations of violence. In 1980, 6 years after the fall of the Thompsons, I received an unexpected invitation. A school in Asheville, North Carolina, was looking for an assistant teacher for sewing and crafts classes. It was an opportunity to start over in a city where no one knew my story, where Gabriel and I could be just another family without the weight of the past chasing us. We accepted the invitation and moved to Asheville. Gabriel was 13 then, growing strong and healthy, with no signs of having inherited his father's cruelty. In the new city, we found peace. I made true friendships, learned to trust people again. Gabriel thrived in school, showing a special talent for mathematics and science. Years later, when Gabriel was already in college in Nashville, studying law, ironically, with the dream of helping people who, like us, had been victims of the powerful, I received the news. Abraham Thompson had died in prison. I felt neither joy nor sadness, just a strange relief, as if a dark chapter had finally been closed. August continued serving his sentence. He tried to make contact a few times, through letters. I never replied. Some wounds are too deep to be healed by words. Some forgiveness is beyond my capacity. What I could do was move forward, building something good from the ruins they had left. And so, with patience and persistence, I rebuilt my life. No longer as Mrs. Thompson, nor as the victim whose photo appeared in the newspapers, but as Dorothy Williams, a woman who learned that the greatest revenge against those who try to destroy you is to live well, with dignity and peace. Asheville became my true home. In these stone streets, among colonial houses and ancient churches, I found the peace I had sought for so long. Today, at 79, I wake up early every day with the first bird song. I make strong coffee, the mountain way, and sit on the back porch to appreciate the dawn painting the mountains that surround the city golden. My house is small but cozy, in the Montford neighborhood. It has a garden where I grow roses of all colors, basil, rosemary, and even an apple tree that bears fruit twice a year. When the apples are ripe, the neighborhood children come to ask to pick them, and I always let them, with the condition that they sit a while to hear a story. Gabriel graduated in law and today, at 58, is a district attorney. He specialized in cases of domestic violence and human trafficking. I know the career choice was influenced by our history, by the determination to protect those who, like us, were victims of powerful people. He married Rachel, a university professor, and they gave me 3 wonderful grandchildren: Matthew, 32, who is already a doctor, Julia, 28, an architect, and Lucas, 25, who followed in his father's footsteps and is finishing law school. My grandchildren know our story. Gabriel made a point of telling them when they reached an age enough to understand. Not the darkest details, of course, but the essential, that their grandmother was a prisoner of an abusive marriage and found the strength to free herself and rebuild her life. I think it's important they know. It's part of our family's history and shows that even in the most desperate situations, there is always hope. My daily routine is peaceful. In the morning, I take care of the garden and the house. 3 times a week, I go to the municipal school where I taught for so many years. Although I've been retired for more than a decade, I continue as a volunteer, teaching crafts to underprivileged children. Seeing the sparkle in their eyes when they manage to create something with their own hands fills me with joy. In the afternoons, especially when the weather is good, I dedicate myself to painting in my small, improvised studio in the back of the house. I started painting late in life, as I told you at the beginning. It was an unexpected gift that old age brought me. I never imagined I would have this dormant talent inside me. My paintings are simple, landscapes of Asheville, still lifes, scenes of daily life. But each one carries a little piece of my soul. Once a month, I exhibit some paintings at the city's craft fair. It's not for the money, although it's a welcome help to complement the retirement. It's more for the joy of seeing something I created being appreciated, taken to other homes, becoming part of other people's lives. I have good friends here. Mrs. Irene, my 82-year-old neighbor, comes to have coffee with me almost every morning. We exchange recipes, gossip a little about the happenings in the city, laugh at our joint pains. Father Simon, from St. Mark's Church, always stops for a chat when I pass in front of the church. And there's the crochet group that meets on Thursdays at Mrs. Zelda's house. 6 ladies, all with life stories as rich as the lace we produce together. I am grateful to have found this community that welcomed me. When we arrived here, Gabriel and I, we were just a single mother and her teenage son. No one knew about our past. No one asked uncomfortable questions. We were accepted for who we were, not for what we had gone through. Not everything is roses, of course. Age brings its challenges. Arthritis sometimes makes it difficult to hold the brushes. The glasses get thicker and thicker. There are days when memories of the past return like ghosts, bringing sleepless nights. But I've learned to live with it, to accept that scars are part of who I am. August died 5 years ago, in prison, like his father. Gabriel told me the news without beating around the bush. Mom, he's gone. I remained silent for a long time, letting that information find its place within me. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't feel the need. The August I knew, the young man I fell in love with, had died for me a long time ago, on that wedding night when the mask fell. Sometimes looking at my son, I see physical traits that remind me of his father. The shape of the chin, the way he furrows his brow when he's concentrating. But the resemblance stops there. In everything that matters, character, compassion, respect for others, Gabriel is the opposite of what August was. He is living proof that we can overcome the shadows of the past, that we are not condemned to repeat the mistakes of our ancestors. When I look back at that naive young girl I was, I feel a mixture of compassion and admiration. Compassion for the lost innocence, for the suffering she didn't yet imagine would come. Admiration for the strength she didn't know she had, for the courage she found in the darkest hours. If I could go back in time and talk to her, I would tell her that it's worth continuing to fight. That darkness doesn't last forever. That one day she would be here, in Asheville, with white hair and wrinkled hands, painting the sunset on the mountains and feeling a peace that seemed impossible in those terrible days at the Thompson Ranch. Life has taught me that true freedom isn't just in escaping physical chains, but in freeing the spirit from the weight of hatred and fear. Today I paint not because I want to forget the past, but because I've learned to transform pain into beauty, suffering into colors that tell a story of overcoming. My dears who have come this far with me, thank you for listening to this old lady's story. If there's one lesson I want to leave you with, it's that it's never too late to start over. It's never too late to say enough to a situation that diminishes us, that hurts us, that robs us of our dignity. If you're going through something similar to what I experienced, know that you are not alone. The first step is the hardest, recognizing that what's happening isn't normal, isn't love, isn't something you deserve. The second step is even scarier, seeking help. But believe me when I say there are good people in the world, willing to extend a hand, just as Ernest did for me so many years ago. I've learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our capacity to start anew each day. When I think about my journey, I see that my wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of overcome pain. In the darkest moments of my life, I discovered that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. Life taught me that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. When I was in that basement, weak and hurt, I thought it was the end. But it wasn't. It was just the beginning of a new journey. My story isn't about what they did to me, but about how I chose to respond. I could have drowned in hatred, in bitterness. Instead, I chose to live. I chose to raise a son with love, build a community, find beauty in small things, like the colors I now mix on my canvases. In every country, in every culture, there are women and men living in situations of abuse, trapped in relationships that are true prisons. If you know someone like this, be the friendly hand that person needs. Sometimes all someone needs to find courage is to know they're not alone, that someone believes in them. Seek information about support organizations in your region. There are people dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence all over the world. Dignity and respect are universal values, rights that belong to each human being, no matter where they are. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. I learned that true fortitude isn't in never falling, but in getting up every time. And that's what I wish for you, my dear, strength to get up, one more time whenever life knocks you down. And before I say goodbye, I'd like to make a special request. If this story touched your heart, if any part of my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel. Your subscription helps spread these stories of overcoming to more people who might need to hear that there's hope, that there's a way out, that there's life beyond abuse. Leave in the comments the word renewal so I know you made it to the end of this story with me. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Each subscription, each comment is like a hug I receive from you. It's the certainty that my story wasn't in vain, that it can help someone find their own path to freedom. May God bless each one of you, my dears, from Grandma Dorothy, with all the love in the world.